Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do another unboxing video. We're going to look at Heart of Darkness, the 2021 game of adventure and exploration by Legion Wargames and designed by Kim Kanger. This game's got a lot of stuff going to it, so let's open up, take a look at the components, and offer some initial impressions on what the gameplay looks like. Let's jump in and get started. So Heart of Darkness is a game. It's about 2 inches thick in a box. It's not all that heavy, maybe 2-3 pounds of weight. The back of the box gives us a little bit of a context in terms of setting us kind of a big picture what the game is about. Game of adventure and exploration set in the mid-19th century, and you're venturing into the deepest, darkest Africa in search of fortune and fame. The things that are going to go on here, it mentions a little bit. You'll map areas, interact with people, encounter wildlife, suffer calamities, and discover many wonders. It's also, of course, a dangerous area. And I think with that in mind, one of the things that I'm really interested in kind of playing this game is that I think this is a very difficult mechanic to get, adventure and exploration in a game. So it's a tricky thing to get right. It's a very definitely, I think, as a game designer, it's a bold step forward to try something like this. Now, if we look at kind of some of the parameters here, it doesn't really mention complexity or the replayability and stuff like that, but we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. I will mention it does say again at the bottom a game for 2 to 5 players. However, I think this could be rewritten very easily to say a game of 1 to 5 players, and I think actually the solitaire element on this game seems very strong to me. And there's actually many places in the rules where it says, if you're playing this game solitaire, do this type of thing. So I think as a solitaire experience, it is very strong as well. And we'll talk about that more as we dig in a little bit. Now let's get this unboxed and look at the components, kind of play around with the stuff inside. We get some baggies, which is always nice because we have a lot of chits and a lot of counters to sort out, and a 6-sided die and a 10-sided die. That's always nice. Now, the game has a lot of chit pulling, and there are a lot of the randomness of adventures and incidents and things like that is determined by pulling chits out of bags and cups. And we get 2 nice kind of fake burlap bags here to play around with and help out with that. So that's kind of a nice little kind of contextual touch to the game as well. Now, here's our rule book. We've got 24 pages, so it's got a little bit of heft to it. We've got a sequence of play here on the back, and the last 2 or 3 pages are made up of an example of play where it kind of walks you through some turns in a game and kind of gives you an idea on how gameplay goes out. But most importantly, if we get back kind of the beginning here, we'll see that although it's 24 pages, the rules, there's a lot of pictures, a lot of help, a lot of handy graphics and stuff like that. And the rules are also written in a sense of kind of how you're going to play the game. So you can really start reading the rules and set the game up and then play the game as you're learning the game. I've gone through about 2/3 of the way through the rule book, kind of reading through things, and I think that's the easiest way that I'll go forward after this is I'm just gonna start at the beginning of the rule book and talk about how they set things up. The map setup and the game setup, there are a couple places where it takes a little bit of time to kind of put everything in place, but then once you're going, things seem to flow pretty well. So I think that's a nice way to do it. It does seem like I'm going to venture on a complexity scale. If we use kind of the standard 1 to 9 scale of complexity, I'm going to call this a 3. It seems very straightforward, although there are a number of kind of procedural items and kind of if you have this and then that, if this happens, then this. The mapping, which is really cool, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we show the game map board a little bit. The mapping part of the game has quite a bit of conditional elements to it, but it works into a very elegant system for how the terrain and the geography of the continent unfolds as you explore it. So that's the rule book there. Let's we get a little bit of promotional materials for upcoming games. That's all good and well. And now we have the map, which is really cool. Now this is a 34-inch by 22-inch map, and I'm not going to open it up. Instead, I'm going to show a close-up of a section of the map, and then I'm also going to show an expanded view of the entire map. And we can see by looking at this now that what you get is the central and southern part of the continent, and that it's a regional game. You're going to move from region to region. It's not a hex-based game in any sense of the way. And you can see also that what happens in terms of how you play, you start in some of these starting areas, and I'll show one here in that close-up. Could probably even find one for us. Actually, they're all kind of on the edge of the map there, so I can't. But I can show you here in the blow-up here. You start in one of the 5 central regions, 5 exterior coastal regions, and you work your way into the interior of the continent. Now, I do want to have a pause here for a second because I've seen conversations on this on Twitter, and I've seen questions and things like this in terms of on Board Game Geek, which is how does the game handle the exploitation and colonialism issue that surrounded these times. And I think there's probably two comments to make about this, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I do feel like they're important concepts. The first one is that it's very obvious that this is a Eurocentric game. Right? So this is a game told from the European cultural perspective of going to a heart of darkness, a continent that is unknown, even though there are a lot of people of color already living there and there's vibrant cultures and tribal existence already going on. The game takes the perspective of you exploring this continent, something that's unknown. You are making discoveries and mapping it and bringing out the knowledge of the continent to the European culture. So it's told very much from the European culture, which was Europe's perspective of the continent at this period in time in the mid-19th century. So I'm okay with that, although I do think it's important that we reflect on this and take a moment of pause and say, this would be a very different experience if it was told from the African perspective. All right, so that's worth saying. The second thing, however, the more important issues is how does it deal with colonialism in terms of subjugation of peoples? How does it deal with the issue of slavery? That were issues that were going on in the continent at this period of time. And the game mentions it, and there's a contextual issue that we'll talk about, but the game isn't about that. You're not subjugating peoples, you're not taking over territories, you're not enslaving people. You are an adventurer, an explorer that's going on in the continent, and that's not your purpose here, and it's not what the game is about. Furthermore, the game does make mention here, and if I show this little area here, it does use the slavery and exploitation of the continent as a context within which your adventure sits. You can see here, for example, Kababish is a region that's the title is in black, and then Nuer is a region the title is in red. When you go into a region where the title is in red, that means that's an area that has been exploited, and perhaps the people there that live, their reaction to your party and your adventuring party is going to be more negative than if it weren't. So the game sets a contextual issue under which your adventures are happening, the contextual issue of the exploitation of the continent that's gone on. So that's a little bit wordy, but I think those are two important issues that we talk about in today's time, and I think it's good to know coming into the game. I'm fine with the way the game has handled things. I do think it's important, again, to take back and have that moment of reflection to say this is very much a European cultural experience and a Eurocentric view of this period of time. And given that, let's take a look at some of the counters and some of the units we get. Now we get 3 counter sheets, and I'll show some close-ups as we go in on these too. Now these are all your resources that we're first taking a look at here, and these are the things that you can bring with you that can help you when certain bad things or good things happen. And one of the things that you're trying to do in this game, which is really cool, is that you're trying to create drama points. And I love games that create narratives, and this is a story where your points literally in the game are drama points. That's kind of your victory points, if you would, and you're trying to have an adventure. So even though something bad might happen to you, it still could create drama points that could kind of raise your fame and fortune up, because this amazing adventure that you've had as you've gone on is part of what made your adventuring a success. So these are the different resources. We can see pickaxes, we can see compasses, machetes and things like that, canoes, there's guides, you can bring a Bible, pistols, medicines and things like that along with you as you go. Here is our second counter sheet. We can see that these are the different terrain features. You're going to be mapping the continent. You're going to be dropping these onto the terrain as you go there. And river mapping and finding the source of different rivers can be a great source of adventure as well. And again, one of the things you're trying to do here, again, is to create drama. These tiles in here, these counters in here, are your special discoveries, which are very rare things. There is an element of an ahistorical element here in terms of, I noticed that one of the discoveries is the Lost World, Lost Eden, Haunted. You do have some zombies in here and things like that as well. So there's an element of kind of fantasy that just touches the fringes of the game, which I think adds kind of a real cool touch to it. Of course, we can encounter wild animals as well. So lots of things. Looks like storms in here. I haven't seen that yet in the rules. But a lot of different things that can happen as well. And here we have more. The right-hand side of this one are the counters that you use on your player card to kind of track your adventure. And then we have more different findings like gold and iron, different peoples that you can encounter, kind of lakes that you can discover, different terms of resources and things that you can find along the way. So lots of different things that the chit system determines are the actions that happen around your adventure as it goes on in the map and on the world. So really cool. And now, lastly, we get a bunch of different pieces here that kind of make up the charts and playing aids of the game. These are the different counters for how many different kind of encounters and events we can have. So there's scenery finding. I mean, just tons of different things. And I think that's one of the things I think as I find this game is like, okay, how is the replayability? And I think because, not having played it, I'm kind of speculating here a little bit, but looking at just the chit pull system and how it all works and creating a variety, I think no two adventures are going to be the same. You also, as you start out, you have a different type of supporter that is kind of supporting your journey. So you could be working for science, you could be working for news, you could be working for a politician, and that's going to influence the point values that you get for your different discoveries and adventures. So there's a different angle on it there. You can also start in different locations and map in different ways. And so there's a lot of different things that can happen, and depending upon the chit pulls and some of the fate that you have in your adventure, I think no two game is really going to play out the same way. I mean, there is a certain kind of, okay, the adventures are going to take place using the same system, but I think you're going to have a lot of different ways that each game can play out. So I'm going to guess that there's a good bit of replayability here. I would say if I was going to give it on a 1 to 9 scale, I'm going to go with a 7 in that no two games I think are going to play out. It's probably going to take you a while before the system kind of settles in and you feel like, okay, yeah, I've seen everything this game has to offer. Here is our drama point chart. So this determines, depending upon what you find, it's going to add or perhaps even at times take away drama points from the game as you play it. So resource chart. So depending upon your resources, they can influence what you can do and different options and give you different choices. So I think that's one of the places where strategy seems to come in a lot, is that you're constantly trying to determine where you're going to pick up resources, what type of resources you're going to pick up, and all of those can help you to solve problems and move forward in the game. There's a couple of these, so it looks like you can kind of pass them around the different players. Now, I will say one thing, and this is probably a good time to say it, in terms of how the game plays out, and one of the things I'm a little bit curious about. You know, it does say the game's it's a 1 to 5 player, a 2 to 5 player game. I do wonder about the interaction among players, because as I was kind of reading through the rules, and one of the reasons that it led me to think that, like, wow, this is a really good solitaire game, is that I'm not sure that I've seen a ton of places. There are some where, you know, a drama point that you have happened to you could actually remove a drama point from someone else. There's some places where you can interact with other people, and if you meet in the map, you both get drama points. But I'm not sure there's a ton of overlap in terms of one player trying to kind of negate or put some hurt on one other person's adventure, or work to a disadvantage, your kind of tactics and trying to work together to try to find some place on the map. So it seems like you've got almost like 5, however many players you have, of those adventures happening on the map at the same time, but not necessarily kind of butting up against each other and influencing in each other a lot. And I wonder how that's going to play out in terms of a multiplayer experience. So I'm kind of curious to see what that might be like in terms of, maybe if you've played that multiplayer experience, you could share it. But I do feel like, again, for smaller groups, in that this could be kind of a really fun game. And I think, of course, up to 5 players, seeing how the map comes out, that would be really cool to see as well. Now, here's our encounter chart. I confess I haven't gotten quite this far in terms of figuring out how this matrix works, but we can see, again, we're going to get plants, healers, wildlife, village, tusk, missionary, just tons of different things that can happen to your explorer. We have our special discoveries over here that kind of talk about how they go out, and here we have incidents. You can get lost, you can run into a war bin, malaria, taboo, accidents, storms, all kinds of things like this happen. So I'm really impressed with how the game has created this plethora of different types of things that can happen, all kind of meshed together within this chit pull system. And then layered on top of that is kind of the mapping of rivers and the terrain in the continent. There's a lot going on here, and I think playing out an adventure will be a real, I'm looking forward to really playing it again, because one of the big things to kind of go back at is that this type of game is really tricky to get. You don't see a lot of games that cover this. It's a tough thing to build into mechanics in the game, but I'm really intrigued to explore the system that the designers used in terms of building out this world and building out this player experience. And now lastly, we get 5 of these. I'll just show one of them here. These are the player cards. So you get 1 for each player. And this is basically where you kind of track your adventure. So here's going to be your number of your Ascaris. This is your time marker that's used for how long you spend inside this matrix. And this is probably, without saying too much at the risk of making a mistake, and I'll show this again close up on the screen, this matrix area is where your mini adventure takes place in each zone. So basically you're going to go into a new region, and then this is where the exploration of that region happens on this little matrix. And you've got a certain number of turns, I think 10 turns, to work through this matrix area. And then we have food tracks, so your expedition needs food. You also need gifts, and you can use those to influence things. Down here you've got both sanity and health. So you've got to not only keep track of your health, but you've got to keep track of your sanity in the adventure. And having those go south in one way can hurt the adventure in all different kinds of ways, and of course can end up in death and all those things there too. Now was taking a look a little bit forward in the rules too, and one of the things that I noticed there were talks about the end of the adventure, and I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out, because it says with a single player you go for 5 of these turns, so you'd explore maybe 5 different regions. And I guess I was wondering why it wouldn't take you back to the starting area, like you've got to go in and come all the way out, but I'm not sure that's a thing in the game. So I do have some questions before I do dig in and start to play, but I think that for now brings us to the end here of our little exploration. And that is an overview of Heart of Darkness. I can say I am very excited to play. I think the positives that I can see in this game are the incredible variety of adventures that your character can have, the incredible variety of things that can happen, and also that sense of exploration. I haven't played a game like this before. I am so intrigued to dig into it, and I think at some point on the channel, we're going to have a playthrough, a single-player playthrough of an adventure going through the continent, play out the whole thing, and see how it happens. First, I'm going to try a couple of games on my own to learn the game, so I think maybe in a month or so we'll come back to it and try a single-player experience to see how our adventure in the Heart of Darkness will take place. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or have any comments to add, if you played the game and have kind of answered some of the questions that I'm speculating on, I'd be curious to hear what you think as well, so please feel free to drop a comment down below. But super excited to play this. It looks like a ton of fun. I am excited to dig in, and again, if you're new to the channel, subscriptions are always greatly appreciated. Try to have wargaming, historical gaming content about 50% of the channel. And again, kind of games for your brain is really the theme of this channel. So welcome. Hope you've enjoyed the time together. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day.